Oakland Socialist talks to Cliff Willmeng, who's running for county commissioner in Boulder County, Colorado.
I've been a political activist in some capacity all my life, at least all my adult life. Out here, we are working very hard to. We're one of the frontline communities fighting the fracking industry. I'm also I've been a union activist or a labor activist for probably about 20 years. I'm a steward in UFCW Local 7. I work at Kaiser Permanente. I'm also an officer, a rank and file officer of the executive board of UFCW Local 7 here in Colorado.
Cliff talks about campaigning against fracking and how he sees the environmental movement in general.
Here in Colorado and anywhere you're confronted by an industry like the oil and gas industry, they wrote the laws. They wrote the laws that are ostensibly there to regulate them. And here in Colorado, the way that's looked is that we've had to build something that looks more like a real social movement rather than the kind of scripted environmentalism that we've been handed by the Sierra Club and the Democratic Party. But it really is a fight against the system itself. As long as these positions, these municipal positions or the state political positions are occupied by folks that are not genuine grassroots community activists, it tends to be that those layers of government are used against the community so that the industry can be advanced. Like the standard prescription for how we're supposed to look at elections is, of course, somebody's supposed to vote for a candidate, and then I'm supposed to go, or that candidate's supposed to go and fight in place of the community. When we don't view it like that, what we say is that the campaign is there to generate the organizational power that we need to be fighting for the day after the election, regardless of the outcome. Industry, but really, my entire political platform has more to do with the issues confronting the working class, increasing cost of living, skyrocketing housing prices, an absolutely bankrupt model for union organizing. But all of this stuff comes out of, that assumption that, you can't affect political change if it's not through the Democratic Party. And the objective fact here is, whether you're fighting for rent control or you're fighting for 21st century rail transportation or you're fighting, to prevent the global climate from being destroyed, it's the Democratic Party that we're actually fighting. And, Boulder County is no different than where I come from in Chicago. It's a one-party system. And, the oil and gas industry would not be able to operate were it not for the Democratic Party. A lot of the intent behind this campaign, for one, is like we wanted to see if regular working class people could compete ideologically with the dominant political forces here. And the answer is absolutely. We're more authentic. Our ideas are brighter, they're stronger, they're more genuine, they have more application. And so then the question becomes, how do we get a transmission to those ideas that can overcome the influences of the political class? And here in Boulder County, that's the Democratic Party. I mean, in Weld County, it's the Republican Party, but it's really two sides of the same coin. I mean, I just don't get where this organizational mass party for the working class is going to happen. If we're not actively building it, I don't think that Amazon is going to deliver it to us so that we can just unwrap it at the door. That's an act of political will that we have to be willing to take on. And so, my position is that we can offer absolutely no more assistance to the Democratic Party at all, that we have to make a very clean break from the Democratic Party, and that the moment that we are courageous enough to do so, for one, we are going to become politically liberated. You're going to feel it. And then also, you're going to have to become a lot more responsible to actually see to the organizational demands of what it means to start to do real political work. So I would suggest the idea that conditional support for the Democrats it's conditional support for the opponent. And so I would always suggest that we don't do that any longer, that we break from that pattern very decisively. The union movement out here, the AFL-CIO, decided to endorse the professional politician over the union member. And that's created a bit of a stir. I should say that my union, Local 7 UFCW, is supporting the hell out of me. I mean, we had like 50 people up here like canvassing for my union. I got a $5,000 donation. I mean, they realized what side I was asking them to take, and they took the right side. And it's amazing, even a fractional support from a powerful union, what that can do when it's applied to a regular rank and file candidate. But as far as the rest of the AFL-CIO is concerned, they're a front group for the Democratic Party on their better days. And, on their worst days, I call them an ATM for the Democratic Party. We wanted to drive a very serious wedge between that understanding and like what it meant to be like a true candidate of the working class. And I think we've accomplished that. In the process, it's thrown the AFL into a bit of a existential spin. It's redefined what it means to be like what unionism really means. Like, from back in the 1930s, where a lot of the unions were originally formed, where it looked more like strikes and occupations and defiant actions from like regular heroic people to like becoming like a cottage industry to Wall Street, and to kind of tying our future and living standards, or our power, to the hope that the employer is going to do well. It's really a very bankrupt understanding of what it means to be a union member and certainly a union leader. And I would go even further. I mean, like, unions today, when you look at like the crisis, the stuff that's coming out of Washington, and like the American political scene, like Brett Kavanaugh, I'm watching, and this absolute swine that's up there that is going to get appointed for life in the Supreme Court. We could dissolve the Supreme Court with a general strike in this country. I mean, we could bring the entire apparatus to a standstill. And what's interesting is that after all the wailing and gnashing of teeth about, not just him, but Trump and all of these other egregious criminals, human criminals, that have been empowered through this kind of defunct strategy, there's nobody suggesting that we bring this government to a halt. There's nobody suggesting in the union movement that we actually flex the muscle that we have. And that's very telling to me. That means that, the leadership right now isn't sincere about these issues, or at least only sincere until it actually might empower the rank and file. And I think that that's really the future of the unions, is getting back to those original militant days that we had, where we weren't asking permission. We were taking power. If we want to change directions, we're going to have to do something differently. And that's going to look a lot more like the labor movement of the 1930s or the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and a lot less of what we're currently being handed as the kind of prescribed quasi-activism of reforming the Democratic Party. If you are a working class person, you're a socialist, and you want to run for office, or you want to build the capacity to do so, like, please reach out to us, man. I mean, like, we've made all the mistakes for you. Also too, like, we need to get into our unions and fight to overcome, what is a very calcified bureaucracy, and start to break apart into a much bigger element that looks a lot more like a movement. It really is a fight against the system itself.
For more information on Cliff Willmeng's campaign for Boulder County Commissioner, go to his website, willmengforgrassrootspower.com.